Welcome to the Explainer. You know, we're all guided by these invisible currents, right? Hidden forces that shape pretty much everything we do, from the tiny little habits we're on autopilot for every day, all the way to things that seem, well, completely impossible. So, let's kick things off with this really powerful idea. The greatest communicators do not fill silence, they weaponize it. That's pretty intense, right? It's all about how the biggest influence isn't always the loudest thing in the room. Nope. It's subtle. It's in the quiet moments. And we're going to see just how fascinatingly true that is. And that idea of subtle influence leads us straight to the central mystery we're unpacking today, something that feels absolutely impossible. How in the world do you predict 6 random numbers from a national lottery draw? I mean, a machine built for pure chance. Come on, let's figure this out. Okay, so picture this. We're on live TV. There's this British mentalist, Darren Brown, and in front of millions of people, he says he's going to do the impossible. He claims he can predict all 6 winning numbers of the national lottery as they're being drawn. So the balls start dropping one by one. And as they do, Darren Brown shows everyone his prediction. And, well, you can see him right there. He got them. Every single one. It was a perfect match with the official result. I mean, it looked like an actual miracle. Just to give you some perspective on how insane that is, the odds are 1 in 14 million. To put it another way, like Darren Brown himself said, you're literally more likely to die in the next hour than you are to guess all 6 numbers correctly. So, how on earth did he do it? Well, the secret, as he later explained, had nothing to do with predicting a random machine. You can't really influence a machine, right? But people, people are a whole different ballgame. The trick wasn't about the lottery balls, it was about predicting what people would do. The whole thing was built on this really cool theory called the wisdom of crowds. It goes way back to 1906, when the scientist, Francis Galton, watched 800 people at a fair try to guess the weight of an ox. Now, nobody got it exactly right on their own, but when he averaged all their guesses together, the result was dead on. Perfect. So Darren Brown took that idea and ran with it, in a few stages. First, he got a group of volunteers, and their average guess only got 1 number. Kind of meh. But then, he took away the pressure of trying to win, and suddenly, their average hit 3 correct numbers. Then, he had them do something called automatic writing, basically writing without thinking, and boom, they hit 4 in a row. So for the big live show, all he did was average out their final subconscious guesses to get his 6 numbers. But here's where it gets really clever. Darren Brown then offered a second explanation. A totally different, way more elaborate story about an inside man, hypnotized guards, specially weighted balls, the whole 9 yards. So which one is true? Was it this beautiful psychological experiment, or just an incredibly slick magic truck? Maybe that's the real point. Influence isn't always about the truth. It's about the story that's most compelling. You know, whether you believe the wisdom of crowds story or the grand deception, both relied on one thing: Darren Brown's ability to command attention. And that's a perfect lead-in to our next idea. Because sometimes the best way to grab someone's attention isn't by doing something big, but by doing, well, nothing at all. Let's talk about the power of stillness. The real masters of communication, they create this thing called a baseline of stillness. It's like an almost complete lack of movement. Think about the chess grandmaster Garry Kasparov, just sitting there like a statue to psych out his opponents. Or even Queen Elizabeth I, who would apparently meet with people in this state of studied immobility, like a living work of art. And the reason they do this is because the payoff is huge. Once you've established that total quiet, the tiniest little movement, a micro motion, feels like an earthquake. The perfect example is Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal Lecter. He had this tiny, almost invisible nostril flare. We're talking a single millimeter of movement. But because he was otherwise so perfectly still, audiences felt it like a tidal wave of predatory attention. It gave people chills, and they didn't even know why. That's how you weaponize silence. So this kind of invisible influence, it's not always a conscious trick or a strategy. It goes way deeper, into the basic forces that pull people together. You know, that chemistry or magnetism we feel. It's something people have noticed for centuries, but we're only now really starting to understand the science behind it. Yeah, for ages, people have tried to put words to this pull. In French, the word for magnet, aimant, is super close to the word for love, aimer. The ancient Chinese literally called a magnet the loving stone. It's beautiful, right? And what they were getting at poetically, psychology now has a name for, the halo effect. It's basically a mental shortcut our brains take. We see one good thing, like physical attractiveness, and our brain just kind of fills in the blanks and assumes everything else about that person must be great too.
And the halo effect is just the tip of the iceberg. There's also something called implicit egotism, which is just a fancy way of saying we're drawn to people who are kind of like us. Then there's the mere exposure effect. The more you see someone, the more you tend to like them. And of course, you've got things like scent and pheromones, these invisible chemical signals creating a subconscious pull. Really, so much of what we call chemistry is just this wild, complex dance of hidden forces.
Okay, so this is where it gets really practical and cool. What if we could take all these ideas about influence and predictability and turn them on ourselves? How can we use these hidden forces to shape the one person we really want to influence? Us. Well, there's a surprisingly simple trick for this, and it's called habit stacking. Here's the core idea. Our brains are lazy. They love running on autopilot. We all have tons of habits we do every single day without a second thought. Habit stacking is all about hijacking one of those existing routines to sneak a new one in. And the formula for it is just so simple. It's after I do my current habit, I will do my new habit. That's it. For example, after I brush my teeth, I will take my medication. Or before I have my morning coffee, I'll drink a glass of water. See? You're not trying to build a new habit out of thin air. You're just attaching it to something your brain already does automatically. And that's exactly why it's so effective. Psychiatrist Dr. Paul Weigel basically said that when you connect a new habit to an old one, it's just way easier for your brain to get on board. You're using your own mind's predictability against itself, in a good way, to build a better routine without having to drain your willpower. So, when you step back and look at it all, from predicting the lottery to commanding a room with silence to hacking our own habits, it's pretty clear we're all caught in this web of hidden influences, right? They're coming from other people, from our own subconscious, from the way our brains are wired. Which really leaves us with one last kind of mind-bending question to chew on.